Daddy, I know about Aunt Celeste. The words hit my husband Thaddeus like a physical blow. Our 12-year-old daughter Isla stood in our kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, holding her tablet with a calm expression that terrified me. I know about the money, too. Thaddeus's coffee mug slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor, sending ceramic shards across our pristine kitchen tiles. The sound echoed through our house like a gunshot, breaking the peaceful morning silence I'd taken for granted just moments before. Let me back up. 3 days earlier, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Thaddeus worked as a senior financial advisor at Meridian Wealth Management. I taught 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary, and we'd been diligently saving for Isla's college fund for 12 years. Our daughter was brilliant coding since age 8, straight A's across the board, and already planning to study computer science at MIT. We had family game nights every Friday, vacation photos covering our refrigerator, and a savings account that represented years of sacrifice and dreams. But everything I thought I knew was about to crumble like those ceramic pieces scattered across our kitchen floor. Before we dive deeper into this story, I want to connect with all of you watching this. Drop a comment letting me know what country or state you're watching from. I love hearing from our global community. And if stories about protecting our families resonate with you, please hit that like button. It's free and helps more parents discover these important stories when they need them most. Now, let me tell you how my world exploded in the span of 72 hours, and how my 12-year-old daughter became our family's unexpected savior. That Tuesday started like any other morning in our suburban home. Isla was working on what she called her advanced computer science project, hours of typing late into the night that I'd attributed to her academic ambition. The clicking of keys would drift down from her bedroom sometimes until midnight. But I felt proud that she was so dedicated to her studies. Thaddeus seemed distracted lately, constantly checking his phone with the kind of urgent attention usually reserved for medical emergencies. I noticed he'd been taking more client meetings in the evenings, staying late at the office with increasing frequency. But I trusted him completely. After 14 years of marriage, trust was as natural as breathing. "Mom," Isla said that morning while spreading peanut butter on her toast, "if someone was stealing from you, how would you prove it?" I laughed, setting down my teacup with a gentle clink. "Sweetie, why would you ask something like that?" "Just curious about justice systems," she replied, but something in her tone made me pause. There was a weight to her words that seemed too heavy for a 12-year-old discussing theoretical scenarios. The phone call came during my lunch break while I was grading spelling tests in the teacher's lounge. The number showed as Meridian Credit Union, Fraud Department, and my heart immediately started racing. These calls never brought good news. "Mrs. Hawthorne, this is Detective Martinez from our fraud investigation unit. We're seeing unusual activity on your daughter's educational savings account." My pen stopped moving across the papers. "What kind of activity?" "Multiple large withdrawals over the past week. The account currently shows a balance of $47. $47. From what should have been $78,000. 12 years of birthday money, Christmas gifts, every tax refund, every bonus check, every sacrifice we'd made to ensure our daughter's future. Gone." I called Thaddeus immediately, straight to voicemail. The automated message played in his familiar voice. "You've reached Thad Hawthorne at Meridian Wealth Management. Please leave a detailed message." I tried again. Same result. Then again. And again. Each unanswered ring felt like another nail in the coffin of my perfect life. When I got home that afternoon, Thaddeus was already there, which was unusual for a Tuesday. His Mercedes sat in our driveway at an angle, parked carelessly as if he'd been in a hurry. 3 suitcases stood by our front door, like silent sentinels, announcing the end of everything I'd believed in. "We need to talk," I said, holding the bank statement that had arrived in our mail that day. The numbers stared back at me in black and white, impossible to deny or explain away. He didn't even look up from folding his dress shirts with mechanical precision. "Natasha, I know you're upset, but you have to understand this is complicated." "Understand what?" "That you stole our daughter's future. That you emptied an account we've both contributed to for over a decade." That's when Isla appeared in the doorway between our kitchen and living room. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't displaying any of the emotions I would have expected from a child witnessing her parents' marriage implode. Instead, she was calculating, observing, analyzing the situation with the detached precision of a scientist studying specimens under a microscope. "Dad?" she said quietly, her voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible for someone who still needed a step stool to reach the top kitchen cabinets. "Before you say anything else, you should know I've been documenting everything." Thaddeus's face went white as copy paper. "Isla, sweetheart, this is between adults. Like your relationship with Celeste Beaumont." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Celeste was Thaddeus's co-worker at Meridian Wealth Management, a woman I'd met at office holiday parties. She was recently divorced, ambitious in the way that made other people uncomfortable, and always laughing too hard at Thaddeus's jokes during company gatherings. I'd noticed their interactions but dismissed my occasional twinge of uneasiness as paranoid wife syndrome. "How do you know that name?" Thaddeus whispered, his voice barely audible above the hum of our refrigerator. Isla pulled up her tablet with the same casual confidence other kids might display when showing off a new video game. "Dad, you use the same password for everything that I sell 2010. That's the year I was born. By the way, pretty sentimental for someone planning to abandon his daughter." The casual way she delivered this information hit me like a slap. My daughter had not only discovered her father's infidelity, but had done so through methods that suggested skills far beyond her age. The technical knowledge required to access someone else's accounts wasn't something they taught in 6th grade computer class. What happened next still gives me chills when I think about it months later. My 12-year-old daughter had screenshots, bank transfer records, text message conversations, hotel receipts with timestamps and credit card confirmations. She'd organized everything into digital folders with the methodical precision of a professional investigator. "They're buying a condo in Scottsdale," Isla explained with the matter-of-fact tone she typically used when describing her science fair projects. "Celeste has been stealing from client accounts at Meridian for 8 months. She needed a partner to help legitimize the money through real estate investments. That's where our college fund went as seed money for their property development scheme." Thaddeus sank into our leather armchair, the one we'd bought to celebrate his promotion 3 years earlier. "Isla, how could you possibly understand something so complex?" "YouTube University," she said simply. "Digital forensics is actually pretty straightforward once you understand the basic principles of data recovery and network security." The explanation was delivered with such casual confidence that it took me several seconds to process what she was actually saying. My daughter had taught herself computer hacking through online tutorials, then used these skills to investigate her own father. The implications were staggering, but Isla wasn't finished with her revelations. She pulled up a spreadsheet that looked more sophisticated than anything I'd created during my entire teaching career. Color-coded cells, mathematical formulas, cross-referenced data points organized into neat columns and rows. The Scottsdale condo was just phase 1 of their business plan. Celeste has been creating fake client profiles, generating false investment returns, and stealing the difference. She needed a partner with clean credentials and access to legitimate funds to open new accounts. That's why she targeted you, Dad. She scrolled through the spreadsheet with practiced ease, highlighting specific cells as she spoke. Total amount stolen from Celeste's clients over the past 8 months, $340,000. Our money was supposed to be the legitimate funds to cover any compliance audits while they established residency in Arizona, which has better asset protection laws for married couples. I looked at this child, my child, and realized I was watching a master detective reveal a federal crime. The scope of what she'd uncovered went far beyond a simple affair or even theft from our family. This was systematic fraud involving multiple victims and crossing state lines. "When did you figure this out?" I asked, my voice sounding strange and distant in my own ears. 6 weeks ago, I noticed Dad's laptop was still warm when I got up for water one night around midnight. He was supposed to be asleep, but he was instant messaging someone. I saw the name CB before he minimized the window. Isla walked to her room and returned with a composition notebook, the kind she used for school assignments. Inside were handwritten surveillance logs, timestamps documenting Thaddeus's late-night computer usage, behavioral observations noting changes in his daily routine, phone call frequencies and duration patterns. It was the kind of detailed intelligence gathering that would have impressed professional investigators. I started tracking his digital footprint systematically. New email accounts he thought he'd hidden, password patterns based on personal information, changes in his browsing history and cache files. Then I gained access to his accounts and found everything. The methodical way she described her investigation process was both impressive and deeply unsettling. This was my daughter, who still asked me to check under her bed for monsters. Now discussing cybersecurity techniques with the expertise of someone twice her age. "Isla." Thaddeus's voice was shaking now. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. "What exactly have you done with this information?" My daughter looked at her father with an expression that seemed decades older than her 12 years. There was no anger in her gaze, no hurt, no desperate hope that Daddy would apologize and make everything better. Instead, there was cold calculation, the look of someone who had already considered every possible outcome and chosen her path accordingly. I documented everything first, following proper evidence chain protocols I learned from law enforcement tutorials. Then I sent comprehensive anonymous reports to the FBI Financial Crimes Unit, the Arizona Real Estate Commission, and Meridian's Internal Compliance Department. All submissions included timestamps proving the evidence was collected over 6 weeks of systematic investigation. She paused, letting the full implications of her actions settle in the room like dust after an explosion. I also created a detailed analytical report showing exactly how Celeste's Ponzi scheme operates and submitted it to the SEC whistleblower program, including documentation of all affected client accounts and projected recovery scenarios. "You did what?" Thaddeus jumped up from the chair, his face cycling through shock, anger, and what looked like genuine fear. "The financial reward for reporting securities fraud can be up to 30% of recovered funds, based on my calculations using historical SEC payout data. That should be approximately $102,000. More than enough to replace my college fund and establish a victim recovery trust for the families Celeste defrauded." The casual way she discussed federal law enforcement procedures and financial calculations left me speechless. This wasn't just a smart kid who'd stumbled onto information. This was someone who had systematically planned a counter-operation against seasoned financial criminals and considered all the legal and economic implications. But Isla wasn't finished with her revelations. She pulled up another screen on her tablet, this one showing airline reservation confirmations and hotel bookings. Also, "Dad, about those plane tickets to Phoenix you purchased for next Friday. The FBI field office there might want to interview you first. Wire fraud across state lines carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years in federal prison." Thaddeus's phone buzzed on the coffee table, then again and again. The sound filled our living room like an alarm clock no one could shut off. "Those are probably your supervisor and the compliance team," Isla said with the same calm tone she used when reminding me about parent-teacher conferences. "I calculated they'd receive the evidence packages about now and start making verification calls." As if summoned by her prediction, our landline rang, The caller ID showed Meridian Wealth MGMT. Thaddeus stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake. You might want to answer that, Isla suggested helpfully. But you should probably contact a criminal defense attorney first. I've already researched several highly rated firms that specialize in federal financial crimes. The precision with which everything was unfolding felt orchestrated, like watching a Swiss watch mechanism where every gear moved in perfect synchronization. My daughter had not only exposed a criminal conspiracy, but had timed the revelations to maximize legal consequences for the perpetrators. Thaddeus's hands were trembling as he reached for his phone, then stopped. Isla, you have to understand. I never meant for things to go this far. Celeste said it was just temporary, that we'd pay everything back with interest once the real estate investments matured. Dad, Isla said quietly. You taught me that actions have consequences. You also taught me that protecting your family is the most important responsibility an adult has. You failed at both of those things. The matter-of-fact way she delivered this assessment was more devastating than any emotional outburst could have been. There was no hatred in her voice, no desperate plea for him to fix things. Just a calm statement of facts from someone who had already moved past disappointment to practical problem-solving. What happens now? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Isla closed her tablet and looked at both of us with an expression that somehow combined the innocence of childhood with the wisdom of someone who had seen too much. Now we wait. The federal investigation will take approximately 6 to 8 weeks based on similar cases. Celeste's world is falling apart right now, and she doesn't even understand why yet. When Dad realizes what's happening, he'll probably panic and make mistakes that will strengthen the prosecution's case. The clinical way she discussed the destruction of our family and the legal consequences for her father should have been disturbing. Instead, I felt a strange sense of pride mixed with sadness. My daughter had protected us when I couldn't protect myself. But the cost was her innocence and childhood trust in the adults who were supposed to keep her safe. As we sat in our living room that Tuesday evening, with Thaddeus's phone continuing to buzz with increasingly urgent calls and Isla calmly explaining federal sentencing guidelines, I realized that my 12-year-old had just changed all of our lives forever. She had taken the worst betrayal imaginable and transformed it into a masterclass in justice, consequences, and protecting those who can't protect themselves. The most remarkable part wasn't what she had accomplished, but how she had accomplished it with precision, intelligence, and a moral clarity that put the adults around her to shame. Thaddeus never made it to Phoenix. The FBI arrested him at our house 2 days later, arriving at 7:30 in the morning with the kind of quiet efficiency you see in movies but never expect to experience in your own driveway. Agent Rodriguez, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and an authoritative voice, explained the charges while Thaddeus sat handcuffed on our living room couch. Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, money laundering across state lines. Each charge carried potential sentences that added up to decades behind bars. The arrest scene felt surreal. Our neighbors emerged from their houses, coffee cups in hand, watching federal agents escort my husband to an unmarked sedan. Mrs. Chen from next door caught my eye and mouthed, "Are you okay?" across our front yards. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what okay meant anymore when your 12-year-old daughter had just orchestrated the downfall of her own father. Celeste was picked up at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport 3 hours later, her suitcase containing $43,000 in cash, fake identity documents, and plane tickets to the Cayman Islands under an assumed name. The scope of her preparation for disappearing suggested this hadn't been her first attempt at financial fraud, just her most ambitious. Agent Rodriguez later told us that Celeste had similar schemes running in 2 other states, with additional victims they were still identifying. The federal investigation revealed complexities even Isla hadn't fully uncovered during her 6 weeks of digital detective work. 16 families had been systematically defrauded over an 18-month period. Retirement funds carefully built over decades. Children's college savings accounts like ours. Elderly clients' nest eggs meant to last through their final years all funneled into Celeste's increasingly elaborate real estate schemes that existed primarily on paper. One victim, Harold Brennan, an 82-year-old widower, had lost his entire life savings of $160,000. He'd trusted Celeste with his retirement fund, believing her promises about guaranteed returns that would help him afford assisted living care. When investigators contacted him, he broke down crying. Not from anger, but from relief that someone finally believed his story about the disappearing money. But thanks to my daughter's methodical documentation, prosecutors had everything they needed for airtight convictions. Her evidence package became the foundation for the largest financial fraud case in our state's history, with recovery efforts that would eventually help most victims reclaim substantial portions of their stolen funds. The FBI digital forensics team later admitted that Isla's evidence collection techniques were more thorough than some they'd seen from professional investigators. 3 months after the arrests, Isla received a phone call that changed the trajectory of her life in ways none of us could have predicted. Agent Rodriguez, who had become something of a mentor figure during the investigation process, reached out with an unusual request. Ms. Hawthorne, your evidence compilation was the most comprehensive citizen report I've encountered in 15 years of federal law enforcement. Have you ever considered a career in criminal justice or cybersecurity? My 12-year-old looked thoughtful, twirling a strand of hair around her finger the way she did when processing complex problems. Actually, I'm more interested in prevention than prosecution. I want to teach families how to protect themselves before they become victims. That's exactly what we need more of, Agent Rodriguez replied. Would you be interested in consulting on some educational materials we're developing for schools? And that conversation sparked something much larger than any of us anticipated. Isla started with a simple blog called Family Financial Defense that attracted attention far beyond our small community. Her first post, titled How a 12-Year-Old Caught a Financial Criminal, went viral within 24 hours. Comments poured in from parents, teenagers, and even law enforcement professionals sharing their own experiences with family financial fraud. The response was overwhelming and heartbreaking, story after story of children discovering parents, step-parents, or relatives stealing from accounts meant to secure their futures. Isla approached each response with the same methodical care she'd applied to investigating her father. She created follow-up posts addressing specific scenarios when grandparents fall for romance scams. Protecting your social security number from family members. Red flags that someone is using your credit. Within 6 months, families from across the country were reaching out for personalized consultations. Her youngest client was 8 years old, a boy named Trevor, whose stepfather was systematically draining his trust fund established by deceased grandparents. Through careful guidance, Trevor learned to document transactions and eventually helped his mother discover $37,000 in unauthorized withdrawals. Her oldest client was 17, a girl named Mercedes whose mother had opened credit cards in her name and accumulated $12,000 in debt before graduation. Isla walked Mercedes through the process of filing identity theft reports, freezing her credit, and building a case that eventually resulted in the debt being removed from her record entirely. The SEC whistleblower reward came through that autumn, $87,000, calculated as 30% of the funds recovered from Celeste's victims, more than enough to replace her college fund and establish the financial foundation for something much larger. But Isla had developed bigger plans than simply recovering her own losses. She donated half the reward to a victim recovery fund administered through our state's Attorney General's office. Then used the remainder to establish something unprecedented, a nonprofit organization called Kids Protecting Kids, Financial Security. Pain without purpose is just suffering, she told a reporter from the local newspaper who'd come to interview our family. But pain with purpose can change the world, one family at a time. The nonprofit started small, operating from our dining room table with Isla managing everything from her laptop. She created educational resources, hosted online workshops, and developed a secure platform where young people could anonymously report suspected financial abuse within their families. The response was overwhelming and sometimes heartbreaking. One particularly memorable case involved twins in North Carolina whose uncle was slowly liquidating their college funds to support a gambling addiction. Using Isla's techniques, the 14-year-olds documented the theft over several weeks, then presented evidence to their parents and law enforcement. The uncle eventually entered treatment and agreed to repay the funds through a structured settlement. Another success story came from California, where a 16-year-old girl discovered her stepmother was filing false tax returns using her Social Security number. Following Isla's guides, the girl documented everything, contacted the IRS, and helped prevent what could have been years of financial complications when she reached adulthood. The stories accumulated into something larger than any of us had imagined when this nightmare began. Isla's work was creating ripple effects across communities, empowering young people to become advocates for financial security within their own families. Teachers began incorporating her materials into consumer education classes. Guidance counselors used her resources to help students identify financial abuse. Even some law enforcement agencies started distributing her guides to families involved in fraud investigations. One letter particularly stood out. From a 15-year-old girl in Oregon whose grandmother was being scammed by a supposed romantic partner online, using techniques Isla had outlined in her guides. The girl documented the fraud, contacted authorities, and helped her grandmother recover most of her retirement savings before they disappeared entirely. "Your daughter saved my family," the girl's mother wrote. "Not just financially, but emotionally. My daughter learned she has power to protect people she loves, and my mother learned she's not helpless against people who want to take advantage of her trust." By her 14th birthday, Isla had expanded the nonprofit to include a network of volunteer teen advisors, partnerships with law enforcement agencies in 6 states, and educational programs implemented in school districts across 12 states. The organization now processes over 300 reports monthly, ranging from simple identity theft prevention to complex multi-generational fraud schemes. Today, Isla is 14 years old and managing responsibilities that would challenge many adults. She's still planning to attend MIT, but now she's been accepted into their early admission program for exceptional students, with a full scholarship funded by CyberGuard Technologies, a company that specializes in family financial security systems. Her nonprofit has grown beyond anything we imagined that terrible Tuesday when our world exploded. She employs 2 part-time coordinators, maintains partnerships with victim advocacy groups nationwide, and has been invited to speak at cybersecurity conferences alongside professionals with decades of experience. Thaddeus is serving 7 years in federal prison at a minimum security facility in Colorado. The judge noted during sentencing that his betrayal of family trust was particularly egregious, especially given his professional responsibilities as a financial advisor. He writes letters occasionally, attempting to rebuild some connection with Isla. But she's made it clear that actions have consequences and forgiveness requires genuine understanding of harm caused. "I don't hate him," she told me recently while reviewing applications for her nonprofit scholarship program. "But I don't trust him either. Trust has to be earned through consistent behavior over time, and he chose to destroy rather than build. Maybe someday he'll understand the difference." And Celeste received a 12-year sentence after pleading guilty to 17 federal charges. The judge's comments during her sentencing focused on the sophisticated nature of her schemes and the vulnerability of her victims, many of whom were elderly clients who trusted her with their life savings. She's eligible for parole in 8 years, but the financial industry has blacklisted her from any position involving client funds. Every month, Isla receives updates about families her guidance has helped protect. Parents who caught financial abuse early because they recognized warning signs she'd outlined. Kids who prevented identity theft because they understood how personal information gets misused. Elderly grandparents who avoided romance scams because their grandchildren learned to identify manipulation tactics. The ripple effects continue expanding in ways that amaze me daily. Last month, a high school in Texas implemented Isla's curriculum as part of their required senior seminar course. Students learn to protect their financial information, recognize fraud attempts, and help family members avoid common scams. The pilot program has already prevented 2 significant cases of identity theft and helped 3 families recover stolen funds. People often ask me if I'm proud of what Isla accomplished during those terrible weeks when our world fell apart. The answer is more complicated than simple pride. I'm proud that when the adults responsible for protecting her failed catastrophically, she found ways to protect herself and others. I'm proud that she transformed trauma into purpose, using her gifts to prevent other families from experiencing our pain. I'm proud that she turned the worst betrayal imaginable into a force for positive change that continues growing every day. But I'm also deeply sad that she had to grow up so quickly, learning harsh lessons about trust and betrayal at 12 years old. I'm sad that she developed the skills to investigate financial crimes, because she needed those skills to survive her own father's choices. I'm sad that her childhood innocence was sacrificed to protect our family's future. What I've learned through this experience is that our children are more capable than we ever imagine. When we truly listen to them, really pay attention to their observations and concerns, they can surprise us with wisdom that exceeds our adult understanding. When they're forced to develop strength beyond their years, they often choose to use that strength in ways that make the world better for others. Isla taught me that resilience isn't about bouncing back from trauma, it's about moving forward with purpose. She showed me that justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about prevention. Most importantly, she demonstrated that when life shows you what you're truly made of, the highest calling is using that knowledge to help others discover their own strength. Looking back now, I realize that Thaddeus's betrayal didn't destroy our family. It revealed what our family was truly capable of becoming. We discovered reserves of strength, intelligence, and compassion we never knew we possessed. We learned that protection doesn't always come from the people you expect, and sometimes the youngest voice in the room is the one everyone needs to hear. If this story resonated with you, I want to hear from you in the comments. What moment surprised you most? What would you have done in our situation? Have you ever witnessed a young person display wisdom that amazed the adults around them? Share your thoughts. Your experience might help another family recognize similar warning signs. And if you know a family dealing with financial betrayal or suspicious activity, please share Isla's resources. Her nonprofit website has free guides, warning checklists, and confidential reporting tools that have already helped thousands of families protect themselves. Sometimes the smallest action sharing information, asking questions, paying attention to details can save someone's entire future. Hit that like button if you believe children deserve financial security and adults who honor their trust. Subscribe for more stories about families protecting each other against impossible odds, and for updates about young people making extraordinary differences in their communities. Remember, when someone shows you who they really are through their actions, believe them. When life shows you what you're capable of overcoming, use that knowledge to help others overcome their challenges. And when a child displays wisdom beyond their years, listen carefully. They might be seeing something the adults around them have missed. The most powerful protection any family can have isn't money in the bank or security systems or insurance policies. It's members who care enough about each other to stay alert, ask difficult questions, and take action when something doesn't feel right. Sometimes the person best equipped to protect your family might be the youngest member. The one who sees clearly because they haven't yet learned that some things are supposed to be impossible. 3 years have passed since that terrible Tuesday morning when ceramic shards scattered across our kitchen floor, like pieces of a broken life. Today, as I watch Isla prepare for her sophomore year at MIT, I'm struck by how profoundly our definition of family strength has evolved. She's no longer the 12-year-old who spoke with chilling calm about federal sentencing guidelines. She laughs more now. Worries about typical teenage things like calculus exams and whether her robotics team will qualify for nationals. But beneath that restored innocence lies an unshakable foundation of self-reliance and moral clarity that continues to inspire everyone around her. Last week, Isla received a letter from Harold Brennan, the 82-year-old widower whose life savings Celeste had stolen. He's now living comfortably in assisted care, his funds fully recovered through the restitution program Isla's evidence made possible. "I think about your courage every day," he wrote. "You gave an old man hope when he thought all hope was lost. These moments remind me that trauma doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it reveals hidden capabilities we never knew existed." Isla discovered she possessed not just technical brilliance, but the emotional intelligence to channel that brilliance toward protecting others. She learned that knowledge without compassion is merely information. But knowledge combined with compassion becomes wisdom. The financial industry has begun adopting protocols Isla developed for detecting family financial abuse. Major banks now use modified versions of her warning systems to flag suspicious activity on youth accounts. Insurance companies incorporate her educational materials into their fraud prevention programs. What started as one child protecting her own future has evolved into systemic changes protecting thousands of families nationwide. But perhaps the most significant transformation has been in how we approach trust within our own rebuilt family unit. We've learned that trust isn't naive belief in others' goodness. It's informed confidence based on consistent patterns of behavior over time. We verify before we trust. We question before we assume. And we protect before we hope. Isla often tells the families she counsels that survival isn't about avoiding betrayal. It's about maintaining your capacity for love and trust despite experiencing betrayal. Bad people exist, she explains to teenagers facing similar situations. But that doesn't mean you become bad. It means you become wise. As we move forward, I want you to remember that extraordinary circumstances don't create extraordinary people. They reveal the extraordinary potential that already exists within ordinary families like ours. Your children are watching, learning, developing capabilities you may never fully recognize until crisis demands their emergence. But there's something I haven't told you yet. Something that's been keeping me awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling while questions I can't answer circle through my mind like vultures. Last month, while Isla was at MIT attending a cybersecurity symposium, I decided to clean out her old bedroom. Underneath her bed, hidden behind a box of childhood stuffed animals she'd never quite been able to throw away, I found something that changed everything I thought I understood about my daughter's investigation 3 years ago. A second notebook. Not the composition book she'd shown us that terrible Tuesday morning. This was different. Leather-bound, filled with her careful handwriting. But the dates went back much further than 6 weeks. They went back almost 2 years. 2 years before she supposedly discovered her father's infidelity and financial crimes. The first entry was dated just 3 months after Thaddeus had started working with Celeste at Meridian Wealth Management. Before any of the late-night computer sessions I'd noticed. Before the suspicious behavior that had triggered what I thought was Isla's initial investigation. Today I accessed Dad's work email for the first time. Read the first entry. I've been practicing social engineering techniques from the advanced hacking forums. The password recovery system at Meridian is surprisingly weak. My hands started shaking as I read page after page of detailed surveillance logs that predated everything I thought I knew about the timeline. Isla hadn't stumbled onto her father's crimes or even suspected them based on his changed behavior. She had been systematically monitoring his digital activities for nearly 2 years. Long before Celeste had even entered the picture. But why? What had prompted a 10-year-old child to begin covertly investigating her own father? The answer came on page 47, in an entry that made my blood run cold. Mom doesn't know about the other money. The account Dad thinks he hid from her. The one with my name on it that's been empty since I was 8 years old. Grandma Sterling's inheritance that was supposed to be mine. He's been using it for something. But I can't access those records yet. I need to get better at this. Grandma Sterling, Thaddeus's mother, who had died when Isla was 8 and supposedly left her a trust fund that wouldn't become accessible until she turned 18. A trust fund that Thaddeus managed as the executor. A trust fund that, according to this notebook, had been systematically drained years before Celeste ever appeared in our lives. I thought about all those times Isla had asked seemingly innocent questions about family finances. All those school projects about justice systems and proving theft that I'd attributed to academic curiosity. The way she'd taught herself advanced computer skills that seemed remarkably sophisticated for a child her age. My brilliant daughter hadn't discovered her father's crimes 3 years ago. She'd been building a case against him for years. Methodically developing the skills she needed to expose what he'd been doing, long before he'd ever met his mistress. The Celeste situation hadn't been the crime, it had been the opportunity. Isla had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike, when her father's behavior became so obviously criminal that the evidence she'd been gathering for years would finally be believed by adults. But that wasn't the part that kept me awake at night. The part that terrified me was what I found on the very last page of the notebook. Written in Isla's careful script just 2 weeks before she'd confronted us in the kitchen. Phase 1 complete. Dad's financial crimes documented and federal case prepared. Phase 2 begins after his arrest. Need to investigate what happened to Jason Morrison's trust fund in 2018, Emma Rodriguez's inheritance in 2019, and the Peterson family college funds in 2020. Meridian's internal security is compromised at levels that go beyond Celeste. This is bigger than one embezzlement scheme. I stared at those names, Jason Morrison, Emma Rodriguez. The Peterson family, none of which had ever come up during the federal investigation or Celeste's trial. Names that suggested my daughter had uncovered something far larger than anyone realized. That evening, I called Agent Rodriguez, the FBI investigator who had handled our case. My hands were trembling as I dialed her number. Agent Rodriguez, this is Natasha Hawthorne. I need to ask you something about Isla's evidence package from 3 years ago. Of course, Natasha. How's Isla doing at MIT? She's doing well, but I have a question about the scope of her investigation. Did you ever look into other potential victims beyond Celeste's known clients? There was a pause that lasted too long. Why do you ask? I found some additional notes of hers that suggest she may have uncovered evidence of other financial crimes at Meridian that predated the Celeste situation. Names of families who might have been victimized years earlier. The silence on the other end of the line stretched until I wondered if the call had been dropped. Natasha, Agent Rodriguez finally said, her voice carefully neutral. What exactly did those notes contain? Names: Jason Morrison, Emma Rodriguez, the Peterson family, and something about Meridian's internal security being compromised at levels beyond what anyone investigated. Another long pause. Then, I need to see those notes. Don't discuss this with anyone else, including Isla, until we can meet. Can you be at my office tomorrow morning at 9? The urgency in her voice sent ice through my veins. Agent Rodriguez, what aren't you telling me? Tomorrow morning, Natasha, and bring everything you found. She hung up before I could ask any more questions, leaving me alone with a notebook full of evidence that my daughter had been conducting a years-long investigation into crimes that apparently reached far beyond anything the FBI had uncovered. I sat in Isla's old bedroom, surrounded by the innocent remnants of her childhood, and realized that the brilliant, capable young woman I'd raised might have capabilities that even I had never fully understood. The question that kept echoing in my mind wasn't whether Isla had protected our family from financial criminals. The question was, how many other families had she been protecting? And what else had she discovered that was so significant that a federal agent needed to see it immediately? As I write this, 12 hours before my meeting with Agent Rodriguez, I can't shake the feeling that everything we thought we knew about Isla's investigation was just the tip of an iceberg. That my 14-year-old daughter, currently studying advanced cybersecurity at one of the world's most prestigious universities, might have uncovered something so complex and far-reaching that even the federal government is still trying to understand its full scope. Tomorrow, I'll learn whether the mother who thought she knew her daughter's story was wrong about everything, whether the brilliant child who saved our family was actually saving far more families than any of us ever realized, and whether the skills that made Isla capable of exposing financial criminals might have also made her capable of discoveries that could change everything we think we know about the intersection of technology, trust, and the hidden crimes that happen behind closed doors in America's most respected financial institutions. The notebook is sitting on my kitchen table now, exactly where Isla's tablet was 3 years ago, when she first showed us the evidence that changed our lives. But this time, I'm the one who's uncovered secrets that might change everything again. As I stare at those pages filled with my daughter's methodical handwriting, I notice something else that makes my stomach drop. In the margins of several entries, there are small symbols I initially dismissed as doodles. But looking closer, they're not random drawings, they're coordinates. Longitude and latitude numbers written in Isla's precise script, scattered throughout the notebook like breadcrumbs leading somewhere I'm not sure I want to follow. I pulled up those coordinates on my laptop, and what I found made me understand why Agent Rodriguez's voice had carried that edge of urgency. The locations correspond to addresses across 7 different states, addresses that, when I searched them online, revealed a pattern that sent chills down my spine. Each address belongs to a family that suffered significant financial losses between 2018 and 2020. Families whose stories made local news briefly before disappearing from public attention. The Morrisons in Colorado, who lost their son's college fund to what was reported as investment fraud. The Rodriguez family in New Mexico, whose elderly mother's savings vanished through what authorities called an isolated incident of financial elder abuse. The Petersons in Iowa, whose triplets' education accounts were drained by what investigators termed sophisticated identity theft. All different cases, all different states, all different supposed perpetrators who were never caught or identified. But Isla had connected them, somehow. My 10-year-old daughter had identified a pattern that spanned multiple states and years, involving crimes that law enforcement agencies had never linked together. The final entry in the notebook, written in different ink as if added much later, contains only 4 words that now terrify me more than any federal charge or prison sentence ever could. Mom will understand eventually. Eventually. As if she knew I would find this notebook. As if she wanted me to find it. But only after enough time had passed for reasons I can't begin to fathom.